sentence.
She put her arms around me and kissed me tenderly on the cheek. The closeness of her body made me more conscious of her tremendous attraction I felt for her. Her was intoxicating and exhilarating, and it always lifted my spirits to an unprecedented height. Renee took my hand and led me into the parlor. Crossing her legs, sat next to me. I put my arm around her, and I could feel the softness of her hair as it touched my arm. She turned to me slightly and stated she had been practicing her English and asked if I could understand her better. I replied in an answer to her questions that I could be in more ways than she could possibly think. She seemed befuddled by my answer. I laughed, reached over, kissed her, and said, "Yes, yes, I understand you." She was pleased to hear my answer and put her hand on my shoulder and took my other hand. Her nails were colored brightly red, brighter red than I had seen, and I remarked about how beautiful they were. I took her hand to my lips and began kissing each finger repeatedly. "Beautiful, beautiful," until she understood. She arose from the couch, putting on a short leather jacket, and explained, "We must be off." I said questionably, "Where?" She only smiled, took my hand, and led me out the front door to the nearest corner when we caught a trolley heading to the heart of Paris. Now, were these trolleys diesel powered or the electric powered? Did they have cables on the top of them?
Yeah, they had telephone poles. And in some places, yeah, some places. Some places they still had
trolley
cables.
transportation in the mid-40s was pretty
Yeah,
common.
it was mixed up, yeah.
Wow. Were the trolleys always packed when you were on them, or were they pretty much empty?
The crowds?
Yeah. Was there many people on the trolleys?
Well, I mean, they got nothing else to do but walk around or shopping and that.
Okay.
The war's over for them.
She only smiled, taking my hand, and led me out to the front door of the nearest corner. We caught the trolley heading into the heart of Paris. The trolley was nearly empty, and we sat together, and she pointed out some attractions in Paris. As she would have moved about pointing at the various attractions, her short skirt would rise even more, and I was more enraptured with the sight than anything Renee was showing me outside. We finally stopped at the intersection, and she took my hand, and we alighted the trolley. We walked for a short distance, almost to the center of the block, and came to a quaint, inviting cave. The sign over the front windows read, "Chez tout on." And we entered. The sound of the quartet played soft music. The maitre d' welcomed us with a smile, bowed graciously, and escorted us to our table. It was all very formal, and I felt a little self-conscious in my enlisted man's uniform. Renee seemed completely at ease with the entire surroundings. As she spoke to our waiter, she was discussing the menu, and she would emphasize her meaning with her hands, gesturing ever so eloquently. Every now and then she would glance at me while the waiter was discussing something on the menu. Then we would turn away and start another discourse with him. I found this side very fascinating and a little bewildering. I was discovering that she had many facets to her personality, all intertwined into one central theme of which I knew very little. She appeared to be at times chaste and pure, and mostly certainly unpretentious and unassuming most of the time, and at least was how she appeared to me. But after viewing all those portraits of the drawings of the German tanks and soldiers, I do not know what to think. So it's hard to determine what the hell to think when you're with an artist named Renee, and she's got a lot of pictures of tanks and upper echelon Nazis,
Yeah.
it's hard to figure it out. It's hard to figure it
They're
out.
on the wall.
Yeah, it's hard to figure
Yeah,
it out.
that's your reformer.
The meal was superb, even though I did not know what I was eating. The meal was superb, even though I did not know what I was eating most of the time. Renee mentioned gizzard, salad salmon, and pullets with herbs, but it was strange to me, and I relied only on one criterion, how it tasted and looked. Renee seemed perfectly at ease in the environment, and I found out a little difficult to compare her when I got to know at the park and her modest home. There were no military people about, just civilians, and that made me uneasy. I thought of what the lieutenant had told me in the morning, and I immediately dismissed my apprehension and enjoyed my time with Renee. I insisted on paying for the dinner and the gratuity, even though Renee was persistent, saying she had invited me, and finally convinced me that she would reluctantly give in, smiling as she did. We left the cafe and walked for a while, chit-chatting about many things, and mostly about the war and when it would end. It was about 1,500 hours, and we're both conscious of my 1,700 hour sign-in. After walking to the end of the block, we got to the
That was a shot, huh? Huh?
Boxville. After a while, we got end of the block. We got to the trolley to take us back to her place. She immediately took me upstairs to her studio and said matter-of-factly that she wanted to paint my portrait. Okay, so she wanted to paint your portrait to put them on the walls with the other Nazis up there.
Oh, I got her portrait, remember?
Yeah. I asked if she meant right now. She smiled and exclaimed that she meant later in the week. That would take several days. It was then I told her that my transfer to Etampes. She was disappointed but stated jubilantly that it was not far from here, only a half an hour train ride. The paintings of the war mark and tiger tanks made me very uneasy. She must have felt my uneasiness, for she took my hand and led me back downstairs to the parlor. We sat next to each other. I took her hand and thanked her for the eventful dinner and praised in the presence of her company. She turned her face towards me, smiled, and kissed me. When will I see you again, she whispered, releasing her hand from mine and laying her head on my shoulder. The fragrance of her hair and her firm breast heavily sliding against my arm dispelled any misgiving or trepidation I might have had regarding her past. Not thinking of what I was saying, so completely engrossed in my thoughts, I replied, probably the day after tomorrow would be the earliest. She was then disquieted by the remark and stammered, I'll wait for you all day here at home day after tomorrow. Then got up from the couch. I looked at her. She stood there, and I could see that she was visibly disturbed about my transfer. Also, I knew she was aware that our time together was coming to an end. I got up as it was time to go and took her in my arms and kissed her. As I held her, I brought her closer to my body, and I could feel her breasts against my chest. She put her arms around my neck and laced her fingers through my hair. We stood there in each other's embrace as I slid my hand up to her breast and gently caressed them. For a moment she succumbed, but to back off and said I must go. I kissed her and reminded me of the day after tomorrow. I got back to the hospital a little bit before 1,700 hours after signing and went to the bulletin board for any more news about our departure to Etampes the next morning. There was an update, a precursor of things to come. We would be in Class A uniforms, OD field jackets, oversee caps, and fall out at 8:30 hours. Transportation would be provided by 6x6s, and they would be covered. Estimate time of travel, 1 hour. No more ambulance rides, no more special privileges, and certainly no more white sheets or pillows. We are being reverted to a strictly Army SOP, standard operating procedure. It meant only one thing: our days were numbered. We would be back in combat shortly. After chow, I wrote one short letter back home, saying a little bit about my hospital stay, and not mention anything about going back up. I told Chris Doss just said hi.
Oh, Chris Doss.
Yeah. I did not write to Ann or Jean, primarily because I did not want to write to them. Nothing had changed in our situation, and I did not want to go over the old ground that I covered a dozen times. There was nothing new to discuss. I was still thinking about the future, and I felt that we would be resolved in my writing. Can we stop for a minute?